What made you quit a job on the spot? Nothing dramatic. After working my ass off during the pandemic and promised an additional bonus, I received a low performance review conveniently timed a day before my bonus was to be paid. The low performance feedback canceled my bonus. Given all the other bullcrap I was putting up with, I broke and quit. I had a nice month off and my new job pays significantly more. Never work for people that don't appreciate you. There are always others that will. Story 2. I used to cut grass in a cemetery. I used a push lawnmower and had to lift it up onto the elevated graves and then back down and onto the next one, over and over and over. Minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. After an hour of cutting grass in the August heat, I sit down for my break, and this guy named Leroy asks, "Was that worth $4.25 to you?" I quit the next day. Thanks, Leroy. Story 3. Asked for a raise and was told okay. Next morning, Friday, I was told by the same person who agreed with the raise that I should put a few more years in and then we'll talk again. Locked my toolbox at the end of the day and called a tow truck to pick it up. Shop manager was shocked that next Monday to find an empty spot where my tools were and couldn't understand why I left. Story 4. My grandfather, who I considered like a father, passed away after a long stay in hospital. We were closer than he was with his own kids, and our bond was quite special. I spoke to my manager about getting the day of his funeral off since I was organizing part of the arrangements and having a day or two of bereavement leave, and he agreed. The day of the funeral finally comes and the staff start calling me, leaving me messages asking why I'm not at my shift, and telling me while I'm in a suit hosting family member at the funeral home that I have to find someone to replace me or face repercussions. Needless to say, I told them to figure it out and never looked back. Story 5. Walked into the interview, everything went well, accepted the job offer, went to the front desk to do the paperwork and noticed that the contract had a different pay amount and that I would be interning for the first month for a $100 week. I asked first about the amount difference, was told, "Oh, this is the standard contract, it just hasn't been updated for your specific offer." I told them they'd need to edit and initial the changes before I would sign. "Oh, that's not how things work here." I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started asking where I was. I told them because didn't sign the contract, I was never an employee. Boy, that was a fun call. Story 6. Worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son comes in, walks past the counter and into the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my coworker, gets into his car and drives away. We both looked at each other, then opened the door only to find this guy literally crap all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner, told her what happened, and she said to deal with it. So I asked my coworker if she wanted to clean it up because I wasn't going to. She declined, and I told her I was walking out. She did as well. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and berated us for 20 seconds before I said goodbye and hung up. Story 7. Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground and it isn't for everybody. Terrible environment and whatnot. This particular individual starting working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was quitting. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks' notice, and without missing a beat, the guy replied, "For the next 2 weeks, you're going to notice that I'm not here." Turned around, packed his crap, and left. Was never heard from again. Story 8. I worked for T-Mobile Store, authorized reseller, not an actual dealer. 1 week, I had an amazing week. Sold 55 phones, brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at that time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order, and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened, so you can show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with my boss. He said everything looked to be in order, and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office, and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually lead to an investigation by the government, according to an old coworker I bumped into years later. Story 9. Worked as a cashier in a local shop. One night, 2 guys came at me with knives trying to get in the till. I just walked away and said, "Have at it," as it wasn't worth the minimum wage to get into it with a couple of guys waving knives at me. After they ran out the store, I picked up my mobile and called the police, then called the store manager. The next day, the district manager meets me as I turn up for my shift the very next day. Her first words were, "It was very unprofessional of me to be on my phone while in work." I laughed at her and told her she could take this as my notice and walked out. I never had a problem with being held up, but the sheer gall of that got me. Story 10. I got mugged on a delivery for Domino's and came back to the shop crying and panicked, had my phone, wallet, and pizza taken, told my manager what happened. Anan, are you hurt? No, but I lost my phone and wallet. I need to call the police. No time for that. Here's your next delivery. It was like 2 blocks from where I was just mugged. I just went home. Police never really did much to get my phone and wallet back. Not like they could. Story 11. Began working at a Persian restaurant in the kitchen. I overcooked a steak slightly. The owner came back, threw a plate at us, then a hot meat skewer before storming off to his office. I dropped my apron, grabbed my bag, and told him I was leaving. His response was, "Okay, at the end of the night, you can go." My response was, "Clearly you don't understand. I'm leaving right now. Here's my parking pass. I'll expect my check in the mail." Story 12. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. We used to get a free McDouble, or hot and spicy with a small fries and drink for our lunch break. One day when I went on break, the franchise owner was there, and when he noticed I asked for cheese on the hot and spicy, he attempted to make me pay for the whole meal because cheese wasn't free. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and started walking towards the break room until he yelled at me not to walk away from him in front of customers and my coworkers. I couldn't believe it. This grown-ass successful businessman was hounding at 16-year-old for a slice of cheese, told him I wasn't going to pay, put the food down, and walked out. They tried calling me to come to work that weekend. I told them no thanks and never went back. Story 13. I had an inside hint from HR that there was about to be mass layoffs, and my name was on the list. I scheduled my week-long vacation, and returning the day before layoffs were presumed to have happened. My boss reamed me out for daring to take a vacation. She said I would never advance in the company if I chose such a formative time in a project to take a vacation. She told me I would never be an executive producer if I went on a vacation before project launch, even though I wouldn't be able to touch it for the week I was away anyways, and that I would always be known in the television industry as lazy. I chilled, took my vacation, and returned. She was mad and said that she was upset with me for having left and made her take care of my project for me. Chewed me out in front of the entire company in the conference room. I chilled and was like, "Aren't you laying off a bunch of us tomorrow? I'm just waiting for you to fire me so I can collect unemployment." Entire room literally starts panicking, and management tries to understand how the duck I knew about layoffs. It was my one true Regina, George causing chaos moment in my life. Story 14. I am a physician assistant and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month, I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, "You know, this has been going on forever, right?" She then said that things would never change and to get used to it because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken, and all they did was wash the instruments in soap and water and put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams. Story 15. Worked for a restaurant pub. The owner would come in with his buddies for hours at a time, a lot of times forcing the bartender to stay way past close serving them. Obviously, I was told not to charge anything because it's the owner's party. After hours of drinks on the house, no tip. Not even from the owner. This started to happen frequently. Usually, we'd put up with it if they'd leave or be done before close. Then we started hearing that the kitchen staff hadn't been paid in a month. Bartenders were being paid because we made like $4 an hour. But the kitchen wasn't a tipped kitchen and made a decent wage. Turns out, the owner was a total drunk duckwit, which should have been obvious and buried himself in debt. A week later, we were told our checks weren't there on the day they were supposed to be. Then 2 days later, still no checks. I told them if my check wasn't there tomorrow, I won't come in for my shift. They said it came. I got there and they said, well, what I meant was it's actually on the way. I talked to and I walked out. I later found out no checks were ever issued there again. They tried to pay some people cash, but it fell apart very soon after story 16. I worked for an attorney. I was 7 months pregnant. I was supposed to be a secretary, but instead I was constantly being sent out as a process server. In July, at the end of my 3 months, August, I was supposed to get a raise, and she said that she couldn't give me a raise. The day she said that, I left at lunch and never went back. She was an awful person, and the guy I replaced told me that he felt sorry for me on my first day as he was leaving. I should have left that day. Story 17. I got blamed for something that wasn't my fault. Was in an argument with our VP or marketing because I had the audacity to suggest a solution that would have avoided our problem instead of accepting fault for something I didn't do. He told me he doesn't pay me to think, so that was my last day. Story 18. I worked at Walmart for a short time. I worked as hard as I possibly could to unload their pallets of merchandise. I always thought I was so damn fast. I studied the process and I believed I perfected it. Every single day, my manager came up to me and told me I needed to be faster. So I did, and the fast pace made me lose a little focus, causing me to break a finger. I let management know that I might be a little slower due to my injury, and they straight up told me we won't tolerate any laziness, and wrote me up when I didn't meet their ridiculous standards. So I went home after my shift and never returned. Never called, never formally quit. I just never came back. Damn Walmart. Story 19. I was at a company for about a year and a half as an assistant project manager. In that year and a half, I had 3 different bosses, the newest one being a heavy micromanager. I was getting paid about 20% below the standard salary for the position, overworked without any additional compensation, and the overall culture of the company was just flawed. My boss started nitpicking my work at the end of the day. I told her I had plenty of time to get it done before the end of the day, but she kept pushing and escalating. She was borderline screaming, and I just cut her off and said, "I'm not doing this crap anymore. I quit." She yelled back, "Well, I need it in writing." And I said back with the straightest face, "I don't have to do crap in writing." I quietly packed all my stuff up, said good luck to my coworkers, and left. A year later, after working a couple of other jobs, I accepted a project manager position with a competing company and make almost twice as much as I was making at the previous. Story 20. Fun times. Working at a grocery store when I was a teenager. I was still out on my own, but working anything I could to make ends meet. I guess I didn't work hard enough being a one-man crew in front of a store manager who decided to tell me to go faster, impossible, and do even better for my 4.125 per hour. I tried explaining I was going as fast as personally possible when he decided to say, "You'll do what you are told, as fast as you're told if you want to keep this job. You should be so lucky." Decided right then and there. Bro, I'd rather starve than work for some stupid duck whose high point in life is the assistant manager at a buy-low grocery store. Quit on the spot. Story 21. I was asked to lie to parents and cover up a kid failing in elementary school by support staff. When I confronted the principal about it, he said that she was just doing her job and I was not a team player for not doing so. So I explained the situation. Same response. I should have helped in covering it up. As soon as kids went home, I started emptying my desk. Story 22. I get a job at a restaurant. First day I show up and the heat is broken in the dead of winter. It was like 35 degrees. I asked the cooks if it's always like this, and they say yes. I walked immediately. Story 23. I was 18. On my lunch, a drunk manager came in the break room, asked me a bunch on invasive personal questions, and when I was curt and evasive, she exited the room, closed the door, and announced to the office, "What a Karen." Gathered my stuff and walked out. An assistant manager followed me out and tried to block my car from pulling out of the parking lot. I pulled around him and left. Heard later that the story going around the office was that I almost ran him down in the parking lot. Not even close. Story 24. Had a job about 10 years ago doing tech support for an ISP for a week. The pay was minimum wage plus bonuses you earned for selling people stuff. And by stuff, I mean terrible, overpriced services that you can get online for free. I was still in the phase of training where I had a supervisor listening in on my calls, and after a call, he told me I should have paused to try and sell him some crappy antivirus service before I fixed his problem. Handed in my headset right there. Felt so skeevy when people call you for help and you have to turn into a telemarketer. Story 25. Worked at a restaurant as a server. We just catered a large wedding reception. The owner's wife was chatting with the wedding party all night and occasionally getting the drinks. At the end of the night, she said she's taking her share of the tips since she helped so much. I say fine, even though that's illegal in our state. An hour and a half after the party ends, the restaurant is still a mess, and the owner's wife is just standing around talking while I was supposed to clean up. It was almost midnight, and I'd worked my other job earlier that day. I walked out without saying a word. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last check. Story 26. The boss wanted my team to work extra shifts without weekends to finish a project next milestone, so we can show the client that we are capable of finishing before the due date. We worked 14 hours daily for 4 weeks with no weekends. In the last 2 days, we worked for 36 hours straight with no breaks since the due date was a day 8 one way. Everyone was ducked and on the edge, no smiles, no small talks, nothing. And we don't get paid overtime. After finishing the milestone, he thanked us and called us for a meeting saying we have to continue working like this for an unknown period until they hire new staff members. I refused with another colleague and said, "We will work for what we get paid for, which is 9 hours per day, 5 days a week." He didn't take us seriously, but we didn't give a duck at that moment. We worked the next 2 weeks accordingly. He called us and said that he was extremely disappointed and that we don't value the company. I walked out, collected my stuff, faced my resignation letter to the HR, and said bye. Story 27. I worked at a certain children's entertainment place known for having birthday parties with pizza and a rat mascot. I was a party hostess. Little boy, probably 7 or so, took a really long time to blow out his candles, so I leaned in. He was making his wish for man's name to stop touching him. I immediately went to my manager with it. He told me that I couldn't do anything with this information. At the time, I wanted to discuss it with the mother. So I quit on the spot and reported it to the police. I have no idea if anything came of it. I also want to mention, this was a franchise. A location connected to corporate may have had a different stance. Who knows? Story 28. Going to the toilet pre-meeting to negotiate a raise, I heard both directors of the company, small firm, everything ran through them, talking outside the window that they were going to flat out refuse any offers and make the a-hole work overtime to prove his loyalty. And he has no prospects anyway. Where will he go? Entered the meeting with my signed and printed resignation in hand, slapped it on the table after sitting down, and stood straight back up saying, "Meeting over." I now work for a successful company, part of a brilliant team of 10 people, amazing pension, terrific bonuses, and obtainable progression with a great work-life balance. Half day every single Friday till I die also. If you're being mistreated at a job, overworked, underpaid, whatever it may be, get your affairs in order and walk. Story 29. I was already having a bad day. My transfer request was denied and supervisors were on my ass like they owned it. Nearing my lunch break, I was stopped by a customer asking about a price check. Me, not able to do a price check, said, "Please take it up to the front. They can help you there." Wasn't good enough. The customer proceeds to berate me, almost making me cry. Finally, she says, "How about you just go hit yourself?" Like what? Knowing that management wouldn't do anything, I just left. Duck that. Being abused for minimum wage? Not worth it. Story 30. Being hired to sell cars. Then in the middle of training, I get pulled aside and told I'm being moved to lot attendant. That position paid minimum wage, and I didn't even get a chance to be on the sales floor. Left and never went back. I was in my mid-20s at the time and was trying to find a possible career. Didn't have time for that bullcrap bait and switch. Story 31. I was working at one of those stands that sells flash frozen ice cream droplets. You know the one. It was at an amusement park. At one point, it's a hot summer day and I'm standing in the sun in front of my 40-degree freezer, simultaneously burning and freezing at the same time. I have a long line of customers because I was near the exit to a stunt show featuring a particular superhero that is a Knight of the Darkness. I scoop some ice cream balls into the plastic tray, slide my scoop over the top to knock off the excess ice cream quickly, and then hand it to the customer in exchange for their money. A wild manager appears. Suddenly, a manager tells me I didn't level off the ice cream correctly. He takes the scoop and small bowl from my hands and levels it off just like I had done for the precious customer. He then dumps it out back into the freezer and makes me do it again while standing over my shoulder. Mind you, I still have a long line of customers, so I do it again, and this time he also is not pleased and berates me some and makes me dump it out and do it again. So I do literally the same thing a third time, and this time he's somehow fine with it and wanders off to go annoy another teenager making minimum wage. So now I'm confused as to what I was doing wrong and have a line of customers staring at me, leaving me thoroughly embarrassed. I process to overfill every container and hand them out to each customer while not taking any money from them. Then I simply walked out to my car and drove home. I never turned off or secured my register. I never formally quit. I never said a word to anyone. I just walked away. If I was doing something wrong, then fine, but there is no time where it's appropriate to scold and reprimand an employee in front of customers, and I haven't been back to that amusement park as an employee or customer since. Story 32. I watched a dude lost his hand, and they only stopped working long enough to clean the blood up. Something didn't sit right with me about that. I walked out. Story 33. After working at a company for 5 years with a set schedule having weekends off, we got a new supervisor that told me no one gets set schedules here and told me I'd have no weekend day and they would be split. Story 34. I worked at a sushi restaurant and we had secret menu items that no one went over with me. The owner was sitting with a guest, I guess they were friends, and he ordered one of the secret menu items and I said, "I'm sorry, we don't have that." And she immediately stands up and started to scream at me and called me a ducking idiot and then snapped her fingers saying "Karines," calling the other servers over. At this point, I was taking my apron off and grabbing my keys to walk the hell out of there. Story 35. I had a very stressful job and was expected to answer Slack messages from my boss at any time or I would be fired. He was in a different time zone, so often I would be woken up at 3 a.m. being yelled at to do something. One day in the office, he was talking crap about me on Slack and accidentally posted it to a channel I was in. I was killing myself for this guy, and he didn't even appreciate it. I packed up and left. Best thing I've ever done. Story 36. I was working for a financial company in social for about a month at the time. It was a little stuffy, but otherwise okay. Until my manager came over, asked why I took so long in the bathroom. Literally, 5 minutes to take a dump. He mentioned something about having to count it as a break and me being more careful in the future or something. I laughed, handed him my badge, and left. Story 37. I was already there 3 hours past the time my shift was supposed to end, along with everyone else who was on my shift. We were all very PO'd. I get that you often have to stay after when you work in food service, but everyone from the next shift was already there, and there was zero reason for us to be there for 3 extra hours. Finally, someone asked to go home, and the manager started screaming in the middle of the restaurant floor that just because your shift is supposed to end at 10 doesn't mean you get to leave then. I tell you when you get to leave. You're all just numbers on a spreadsheet to us. We can replace you in a heartbeat if you don't want to be here. So I dropped all the money on the table in front of her and said, "Replace me then, duck you." Found out later that they lost damn near half their staff that night because most others followed my lead after. There was a huge football game the next day right across the street from the place, and they got to deal with that with no servers. I went to the game and had the time of my life. Story 38. Upper manager bullied a coworker until he hit himself. Then the manager turned his attention on me, yelling at me in front of subordinates, yelling at me over the radio, sabotaging my workload and projects. I simply said, "Duck no, dude. I don't care who you are or how much money I'm making. I'm not accepting that level of abuse." I walked out and called the district manager, told him I left my credentials in his office and won't be back. When I had my exit interview, I was very honest and was offered a lateral promotion to a sister company. But the taste is, my mouth was simply too sour. Story 39. It was Thanksgiving Day at Kmart, and I had been working nonstop for 5 hours because of all the good deals. I had a drink under my register, and I took one drink of it. The assistant manager looked at me, but didn't say anything. 10 minutes later, it was time for my much-needed 30-minute lunch. I proceeded to ask for coverage for my break, and the assistant manager told me I didn't get a lunch since I took a drink of my Sprite. I then proceeded to tell her too bad and walked away and got all of my stuff out of my locker and started walking out to the parking lot. Then, the store managers all rushed out begging me to come back and work and apologized. They said I could take my lunch. They even had the assistant manager, pathetically, apologize to me. I think she got in big trouble because she never treated me like a Karen anymore. Story 40. I was getting married. I had a temp job and told them on my first day that I needed a weekend off in a couple of months for my wedding. I reminded them every couple of weeks, had it on the calendar, and even reminded them that Monday. That weekend came, and I was on the schedule. I told my boss that I needed it off for my wedding, and she said, "You're just a kid, can't you move it? We really need the parts." Admittedly, I was 21 marrying my 19-year-old girlfriend, but yeah, I laughed at her and left. We were scheduled Saturday and Sunday, 2 attendance points, and you're fired. So I assumed that I'd be job hunting on Monday after my wedding. I went to another temp agency on Monday and had a job lined up for Monday evening. On Tuesday, the temp job called and asked if I was coming back. I told that person, the temp agency lady, what they'd done to me. She was upset that they'd done that, tried to get me to go back, but I liked the new job and stayed there. Story 41. Call centers man. Been at the job near 4 months when an employee passed out behind me at his desk with a heroin needle in his arm. Managers had someone call 911 while they quickly grabbed all of the dude's substances. After the ambulance loaded him up, another employee asked me if I wanted to take my break and snort an 8-ball with them. I walked up to a manager and peace out. Story 42. I worked at a Dollar General for about a month. That's all I could put up with. The big thing I struggled with was how I was constantly criticized for not stocking shelves well, but I was never given specific direction as to how I was to improve at my shelf stocking. Literally, some crap like, "You're stocking shelves poorly, do better," was what I got told by the manager many times. Cracking under this pressure on the last day, I worked a full shift. I poured all of my might into what I believed to be the best shelf stocking I'd ever done for that hellhole. I cleaned the bathroom spotless, but there was never a complaint about that anyway. I even had the key holder, assistant manager type figure, check all of my work on the shelves and bathroom, where I was met with praise and confirmation. To answer question, the manager greeted me at the door the next morning for a run-through of my performance, where I was naive enough to believe that I was finally getting the pat on the back I had wanted so badly. Instead, she tried to convince me that I left a huge crap stain in the men's room toilet bowl and left her with my worst stocking job yet. I got mad, told her that I felt as though I was being treated unfairly. She told me that she was sorry that I couldn't take criticism. I told her that I was sorry that she had to pull applications and find a new sale associate to deal with her bullcrap. Know your worth, people. Story 43. Worked a retail job as a cashier at store whose name sounds like hose. One part of that job, as I'm sure many who have shopped there know, is to sign customers up for our rather predatory credit card. We were supposed to ask every customer, no matter the dollar amount of the transaction. Well, I was helping a woman and told her she could save money if she signed up for the credit card. She seemed interested, but I could clearly tell that English was not her first language. I grabbed one of our pamphlets and made it abundantly clear to her that this is a credit card, not a rewards account or something of that nature. When she understood, she said, "Oh no, not today." Understandable. Well, I didn't know one of my supervisors was standing behind me. After she left, he asked why I did all of that, and if I try to talk every interested customer out of signing up. When I explained myself, he said, "Next time, sign them up. They don't know any better." Handed him my red vest. That was it, story 44. Not on the spot, but I was passed over for a promotion for a role I'd been doing unofficially for 6 months. There was no official position for it when I started doing it. It was one of the manager's responsibilities and they delegated it to me. Honestly, I was happy to do it, and I was frequently praised for how efficient and thorough I was doing it. So when an official position opened up to do it full-time, I seemed like the obvious choice. A bunch of my coworkers didn't even apply for it because they told me they didn't think there was any point since I was obviously getting the job. They gave it to a guy that worked in a different department and had no experience using the complicated system required for that job. Then the manager asked me to train him in it. Except I wasn't really asked. I was told in a way that sounded like it was asking. We called it being voluntold. I refused. I said to the manager, "If I'm not good enough to get the job, I'm not good enough to teach someone else how to do it." The manager then accused me throwing a temper tantrum. I quit about a week later. Honestly, that wasn't the only reason. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Even the other managers couldn't believe he said that. Story 45. I worked for a placement agency at a manufacturing facility. I had worked 7 of my 8-hour day when one of the supervisors came by to ask anyone on the crew I was on if they would stay for another 4 hours. We all looked at each other and politely declined. They came back one more time to ask, and again, we declined. Then they came back and demanded that one of us stay behind for the 4-hour shift, or all of us were going to be written up for attendance. This pissed everyone off, but because we were work placement instead of employees, we were unsure who to talk to. Some of the other crew told the supervisor they can't because they have to pick up their kids, etc. When the supervisor left, the crew had multiple people saying they can't get written up again or they would lose their job. I had scheduled a dinner with my in-laws, so I called the husband and told him the situation and that I would stay. Told the crew I'll stay, don't worry. Told the supervisor, got put on another crew that had work for 1 hour but was required to stay for the full 4 hours. Next day, I called the main office and explained the situation. They said they had a representative on site due to this manufacturer being such a large client. Called the on-site representative and explained the situation. Was told they have a lot of attendance issues. Again, explained I had never had attendance issues, and everyone on my crew was threatened with being written up for not staying 4 hours after their scheduled shift. On-site representative still defended the actions of the supervisor and threw attitude at me. Fine, I don't need you, I quit. And that's the story of how I learned about my workers' rights and workplace harassment. Story 46. Worked as a waiter at a place that promised me full-time hours, but only gave me part-time hours. They expected me to be top of my game, despite not paying me enough and barely giving me enough hours to survive. They scheduled me to work on the day I was taking my girlfriend, who was visiting from out of town, to the station. And when I asked for one HR off so I could take her to the station, they said no and lectured me on how I was no more special than anyone else who worked there. It was raining all week and there was a food festival on in town, so the restaurant was dead all week. I left that day and never went back. Story 47. When I was 16, I was a busboy off the books. Made $250 a week working 35 hours a week because they paid per day as opposed to per hour. Manager comes to me and says they're restructuring how the pay scale is and said he wanted me to work less days, same amount of hours, but for half the pay. I made him repeat to me his plan, and once he confirmed it, I said give me money for the week because I'm leaving. Story 48. Before I started working at Dollar Tree, I asked if I could have a day off on Sunday, and they said sure, and that they promised to give me that day off. During my first week working there, I ask every single day for a work schedule and remind them that they promise that I get Sunday off. That entire week, they refused to give me a schedule and called me at random times of the day to work, which was ridiculous because at the time I had college classes to attend, so it was battle on what time I could work. When Sunday came, I was at a carnival with my husband. He bought tickets for that day and it was his only day off to spend time with me. And the moment we decided what to do together, my boss called and told me to come to work. I was baffled and reminded her that she and the others promised that today I could have off since I work all 6 days at random times without complaint. She said in a very mean way that she never promises such a thing to me and demanded I come to the store now. In that moment, I told her to duck herself and I quit over the phone. Within the next day, I made a complaint to the company on how unprofessional she and the others were with me and gave them pictures on how unsafe the environment was for our younger workers there. Story 49. I worked as a manager in this really awesome cafe bar My interview was basically drinking a bottle of wine with the owner whilst chatting. Totally relaxed vibe, local artwork on the wall, which she sold for no commission, indie music as background noise so you could still have a conversation, etc. One of the guys who worked there was in a band and would often go on tour, and she always made sure his job was waiting for him when he got back. Fast forward 3 years and she became pregnant with twins and decided that she wanted to be a som, so she sold the place to a young guy who purchased it as a gift for his fiancée. A nice gift, no? But it soon became apparent that he did this because she couldn't actually hold down a job due to even the most simplest of tasks being entirely beyond her. It took me 4 weeks to teach her how to use the coffee machine. She spent the evening shifts giving freebies to her mates, and she totally gave up on using the panini machine. After finally mastering the coffee machine, she announced that they were going to be redecorating, so we would either have to take a week off unpaid or use our holiday time. Everyone was forced to use the holiday time. Came back a week later and we totally didn't recognize the place. It now had white walls with huge TVs blaring out dance music in a space that only had 12 tables, so loud that we couldn't hear what anyone was saying. We checked the rotas and I had lost 10 H'ers a week, but the band guy had lost 20 Rs. Naturally, we asked WTF, and she informed us that she could run the place without us, so cut out hours. We asked if they could delay the new rotas by a month to give us a chance to find extra work elsewhere. I was okay as I had a second job that begged me to be full-time, but band guy didn't. She said that as we didn't have contract with her, she didn't have to give us any notice. Not going to lie, I was fuming. So I took my apron off, placed my keys on the counter, and said that as we didn't have a contract, I didn't have to give any notice that I quit. Then promptly walked out and never went back again. The place closed down within 3 months. Story 50. I had worked for a cleaning company, and I had a total disaster of a person named Tina as my manager for about 4 months. Tina would work the night shift with a crew and basically did nothing. She would leave the majority of the work for me to do during the day, when it was a lot harder to do as I had my own list of duties as well as whatever she left for me from her own list. I was tattering on the edge of quitting, but I hadn't found a replacement when one day I got a call from head office that Tina had quit, and for about a month the job was exceptionally better and I effectively was my own boss. Things were going remarkably smooth for again. About a month when I got a text message from Tina asking me to do a bunch of extra stuff. I called the owner and they told me that Tina had approached them about coming back and that they were rehiring her in her former position, and I literally just packed up and walked out about an hour into my shift. I had zero intention of working another minute for that woman and held to it. Story 51. I worked at a privately owned McDonald's when I was about 17. I worked in restaurants since I was 15, so I was kind of like the head cook, as far as that can go at McDonald's. Ran the grill and made all the sandwiches. This manager, who spent 20 years working at the place, was a complete Karen to everyone in the store. But I worked day shift and she worked night, so I never had to deal with her. One day, they switched her schedule because another manager went out of town. She got on me because I didn't cleanly shave that morning, grabbed a crappy used razor they kept in the office, and made me shave dry in the dish pit. About an hour later, we're getting slammed. I'm tossing out burgers quicker than 2 jiggles of a jackrabbit's ass. But because I was putting the onions on before the condiments, this waste of space starts flipping crap on me and telling me that everything is getting sent out wrong. I turned to her and said, "You're a Karen and I'm in a hole. We can't work together." Threw my apron on the ground and walked out in the middle of the busiest Friday afternoons we've had. Story 52. I worked for a junk company that initially started off pretty good until it was bought out by a new owner from British Columbia. The new owner started implementing so many new policies that prevented us from making the decisions we once were able to make, and also new restrictions that would make us lose our profit share for the day at the smallest mistake. It didn't help that she also hired a get-ringer to be our new general manager who could not have been more out of touch with normal employees. Not even a month after this new douche manager arrived, he kept saying, we were messing up constantly, saying, we've had the worst records of the entire company, the worst driving records, etc. It's like he only thrived off of telling us what we did wrong. So we were really busy one day, and instead of actually starting work, he wanted us to have another meeting where he could scold us for messing up constantly. It was also only a week after the last meeting. We're only supposed to have them once a month. The meeting was set at 7:30 a.m. for him to scold us for half an hour and then get to work on a busy day where we're forced to go as fast as we can without messing up even once. The stress of being forced to work faster while also screwing us over with all these stupid new regulations had reached its boiling point with me. So instead of going to the meeting, I called him at 600 a.m. and told him I was never coming in again. He begged me not to leave and asked if I could at least do that one day. But I said, no, go, screw yourself, and hung up the phone and blocked his and all his associates' numbers, then went back to sleep. I now work for myself, and from what I heard after I quit, a ton of people quit from that place. I can't imagine it's going to stay in business much longer. Story 53. I took a temp job in a call center. It was outbound sales, calling people and offering them Time magazine's newest book, Portrait of the Presidents. We had a rule of having to hear no 3 times on a call before we could end the call. First 5 minutes on the floor, I placed 6 calls and was hung up on, sworn at, and yelled at for interrupting dinner. After the 6th call, I took a deep breath, hung up my headset, and walked the duck out there. Story 54. I was a psych tech for 5 years, and the person who did the schedules hated me because I turned her in on so much BS she was not doing. One day, she took everyone off the schedule, making me work alone with 36 clients in 2 buildings. No nurse, no other tech, no staff. I called my manager and he said, "Ops, we will try to call someone in." No one would come in, and they would not let anyone have overtime. Mostly had 30 clients all screaming at me for detox meds, smoke, and anything else. I tossed keys down and told clients I quit. Here's keys to all the doors. Have fun. All but the nurse's medic's door. They tried to sue me, saying I willfully abandoned sick clients, but as soon as they saw, they left a psych tech by themselves and told me to hand out meds they knew they were ducked. I got a huge check to keep my mouth shut. Story 55. This was back in the day, shortly after college. I was still working as a delivery driver at a local pizza place. It was expensive pizza and the tips were good. Plus, it was during the height of the Great Recession, so I was just glad to have a job. Because I had just graduated, freed up my schedule. I started regularly getting put on the lunch shift, which blew absolute donkey banana. All your work is from 11 a.m., 1 p.m., and it's super stressful. Then it's completely dead, aka no tips, from 2 p.m. and 5 p.m., so you're just doing dishes for minimum wage. Then the manager started to try and send me home anytime there wasn't actively a delivery. So I'd get halfway there and then a delivery would call in and I'd get called back. End result, he saves $0.35 in wages. I spend money on gas plus wear and tear on the car. Then one day I come in and look at the schedule. It's the clip-in from hell. I'm on from 5 p.m., 3 a.m. Thursday, 11 a.m., 5 p.m. Friday, and 5 p.m. 3 a.m. Saturday. The only shift where you would make real money is the Saturday shift. I said duck that and left a note on his desk resigning. Story 56. Owner just made it where the whole front office has to text her so she can change our thermostats for us. We've had control over our thermostats for the last 10-15 years. It's not gonna go well. Such a controlling thing to do. To think I should determine everyone's comfort level. Kicker, 85% of the time she is not in the office. The awkward part is, if she was in the office any more than 15% of the time, it would be worse than no AC. Story 57. Worked as a bartender. Spent 2 years working for a promotion. Finally got it, but my mental health deteriorated and I attempted to step down, making my boss aware of this. He told me to stick with it, and I did. Unfortunately, after a few weeks it got worse and I would complain about being at work. Not for the fact I was working, I just didn't want to be anywhere. Boss then decided it would be a good idea to fully have a go at me in front of the whole staff team and demote me, which was ducking humiliating. Told him I was leaving. This was only like 2 days ago. Story 58. I was a senior production supervisor in a factory and needed an office for the mountain of paperwork that my job involved. My manager decided that the boss's son needed my office more than me, as he was more important. He'd literally just left university and didn't know his A-rise from his elbow. His role in the company was to wander around getting feedback from the staff to see if they could implement new innovative ideas. No paperwork needed, just a notebook to pass ideas back to daddy. My manager told me at 8 a.m. that I no longer had an office and to do my paperwork in the canteen. So I asked, "Where do you propose I put my 3 filing cabinet?" "In the bathroom." His response was, "If you don't like it, you know where the door is." "Okay, no problem, I'll see you around." Packs my crap into my car and head home. 15 missed calls by 3 p.m. asking for information. I pointed them all in the direction of the owner's son. Next morning, I get a knock on the door from the owner wanting my contacts list so they could get things done. Nope, that's my contact list that I brought with me to the company. So it leaves with me too. Accused me of being unreasonable. I laughed in his face and told him to get the manager to contact people he knows to resolve your problems, knowing full well that the manager has no contacts whatsoever. Enjoyed a fantastic 3 months off. Got contacted by a rival company who said, "When you are ready to rejoin the workforce, give us a call." Now working for the rival company, getting an extra $2,000 a year and treated like one of the family instead of like crap by the previous company. They closed their doors in 2010 and I laughed my rise off at them closing down. Story 59. I had given birth to a baby about 3 months prior, and we usually had a pretty casual, relaxed dress code at the office. Corporate was coming though, and we were all told to dress up. Okay, No big. So I woke up early that morning and my baby was still sleeping in my bed. It was dark in my room and I went to put on my outfit, which included a long black skirt. It didn't hit me until I actually got to work that I had put on the wrong one. The one I had on had a slit up to mid-thigh. It was too late to go back and change, so I figured I'd just stay at my desk as much as possible so corporate couldn't see. Well, my boss saw. He ordered me into his office and with the grossest, most lascivious look on his face, brought out a pair of scissors and told me that the slit wasn't high enough. Duck that noise. I didn't report him, unfortunately. I was young and afraid, and I was his executive assistant receptionist. Because some of his employees were crap, he got calls almost daily demanding to speak to the president of the branch, him, and every time I begged them not to because I would inevitably end up yelling, "I have a team of lawyers, and I'm a multimillionaire, and I will end you." So no, I unfortunately did not report him. He would have crushed me. Story 60. My company laid off 20,000 people over a year in a very unhuman and disgusting way. These people were treated like trash even though they made the company what it is. After seeing how people were laid off, I decided to quit. Story 61. 18-year-old me had a summer job at a small landscaping company. Foreman chewed me out for laying sod incorrectly. I had no experience and no training. Then he told me he'd break my arm if I kept taking unneeded breaks, when in reality, I was just getting water. Got back to the shop and was told to go mow the owner's lawn. They lived just up the road. I drove home instead. Story 62. My first job was Pizza Hut. There was a ghetto area we kept blacklisting for robbing drivers, and the management kept unblacklisting it. I got the flu and called out. Guy who filled in for me was robbed at gunpoint, took his phone, car, wallet, etc., and left him stranded on foot in the ghetto. I found out when I walked into work a few days later, walked right back out. They didn't care about our safety. Story 63. The debt relief law firm I worked for stole $19,000 in incentives for a young family that was in distress and losing their home. It was soaked up in bogus attorney fees and high-fived about in the office. Story 64. Not quite on the spot, but the manager was telling the new hires, which included me, how he beat the crap out of someone for some reason that I cannot recall. Apparently, the court case had been dragging on for quite some time. Alrighty, little crazy, but what manager is completely sane? Then a few weeks later, a hurricane comes through. Pretty bad, my house only lost power for a day. But most of my coworkers lost power for at least 2 weeks. So we eventually go back to work, and the manager is telling us the harrowing story of how he managed to find a generator when a hurricane is coming. I'll spare you the details, but it's pretty much impossible to find a generator if a hurricane is about to hit. So this nutcase is trying to install this generator at his house and sees someone driving by, eyeballing his generator. Or so he imagined. Like any completely normal person, the manager pulls out a gun and fires a few rounds into the air to scare them off. I can only imagine what the poor person driving by thought when he saw this a hole pull out a gun and start shooting. In response to the gunshots, his neighbor comes running over. Why has no one called the cops yet? To see if everything is okay. My manager tells him that someone is trying to steal his generator, and if it goes missing, he's going to hold the neighbor responsible. At this point in the story, my mouth is hanging open, and I'm like, did I just listen to? This man is insane. Why is the neighbor responsible for his generator? This makes sense. I slowly noped out of that job. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he ending up lost all of his coworkers one day in a fit of rage. Story 65. My dad was in hospice, and for 3 days he was up and down. We had been told several times that he was close to dying. Well, on the 3rd day, his breathing was extremely shallow and his systems were shutting down. I got the call at work that I needed to come down. They were preparing end-of-life care. I went to my HR person and told her the situation. She said, "Did he come back to life and die again? Because I'm pretty sure you've used that excuse before." I told her she could go duck herself and quit. Story 66. Resigned from a job because my old boss promised me salary after 2 years and then reneged. On top of my office job, he made me work with another department that was short-staffed, and we always had to work 12-plus hours, from either 2:30 a.m. or 4 o'clock a.m., and often have our lunch break 8 or 9 hours after start time. Unprofessional and lying boss made me leave. Eventually found a much better job. Story 67. I was told by the owner of the establishment I worked at that the customer does not matter. This was about an hour after we completely ducked everything up with that customer, and I had personally bought them lunch while we tried to rectify the situation. The owner was unhappy with me because he said buying them lunch was me admitting weakness. For reference, this couple had taken time off of work to fly in from 3 states away and come purchase from us, and the product they were receiving was in horrible condition. Figured that was a good place to end things. Our goals did not seem aligned. I was in a full commission sales position, so the customer literally pays my salary. They will always come first. Story 68. My first job was working as a dishwasher at a seafood place. I wasn't hired as a dishwasher, I was supposed to be a busser. They just shoved me on the washer and left me there. One of the other employees there was an elderly man who worked alongside his wife and grandson. Every day he would find an excuse to walk up close to me and put his hand on my ass. I should have reported him, but I doubted anyone would have believed me since he'd been there for years. And I'd only been working for a month. I just called the manager, told her I had to quit for school reasons, and never looked back. Story 69. At 17, I was a young line cook at an upscale Italian restaurant. I was picking everything up so quickly I knew all the stations on the line within 10 months of hiring. I was getting minimum wage, at the time $7.25 per hour, and asked for a $1 hour raise to reflect my diverse capabilities. Got denied and asked the chef when I could get it then. She said, "You're too young for a raise. Just be happy with minimum wage." In response, I said, "I may have to start looking elsewhere for a job who will pay me what I'm worth." She then said, "Don't you know how expendable cooks are? If you leave, I can replace you on the spot." So I did. Sunday evening dinner service, very busy. At the height of the night, I and my friend who I got hired took off our aprons and walked off the line towards the front door. He came with me in solidarity, plus I was his ride home. Felt good for a day or two, but I've never quit that way ever since. Been in the service industry for 23 years now. Story 70. Logistics brokerage in 2019. It was a small company, only 20 employees in the back room of a shared workspace. My hours were 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Now, this was a 35 minutes commute both ways, and if I missed the 5 p.m. train, I wouldn't get home till 7. I would pack up and leave right at 4:30 and almost have to run to the train to get a seat. One day I came in and was instantly pulled into a meeting with all the managers. I was yelled at for leaving at 4:30, said my shift ends when everyone else goes home, and I just sat there waiting for my time to speak. When it was time, I told them my hours were set by them at the time of hiring with nothing said about staying till everyone is done. I had a family I wanted to get home to, and all my work was done by 4 anyway. I got yelled at about work ethic and how I will look bad to my coworkers. I basically said, "Duck it," and went to my desk and sat on Reddit all morning, went to the bar at lunch and got drunk and came back to work. At that point, I was done. My wife agreed with me that the place sucked, and I just packed up my desk and left in front of everyone at like 2:10. It felt amazing to ignore my managers calling after me and then ignoring all the calls and texts. What are the reasons that you have quit jobs? Story 1. 2. Still, I rationalized it that I was being paid to work, and ultimately it wasn't up to me to compel people to do the job they're being paid to do. That was up to the boss. I would do my tasks diligently and mind my own business. However, that line of thinking doesn't apply when the work is piling up by the second, and you're the only one who's expected to take care of it. I would be doing 10 things at once with 5 people on hold and every incoming call line ringing. I didn't have a nanosecond to catch my breath. Come lunchtime, the annoyance of the other 3 was palpable because they knew they had no excuse to deny me the time I'd been allotted to step away, and without me there to do everything, they had no choice but to lift a finger. Then, one day, a fateful decision was made. The office had undergone some renovations, and for some inexplicable reason, they had decided to place the printer right beside my workstation. And this printer would go from the second the lights came on in the morning until the second the last person left in the evening. Reports, invoices, contracts, all kinds of nonsense would spew out of it. And of course, having a noisy printer right next to you, which is continually and relentlessly hissing and clanging and sputtering, is quite jarring when you're trying to hear people on the telephone and do the work of 4 people. It is downright unacceptable when the other 3 are casually chatting on the phone or leisurely strolling around in front of the building puffing away or eyeing documents over yogurt and coffee all day long. I approached the manager and suggested that the printer could be moved to the other end of the office where it would be less of a bother, but that request was denied because it would be too inconvenient to continually have to expend the effort to walk over and fetch the printouts. I then suggested that perhaps a barrier could be placed between myself and the printer, which might help to lessen the noise, but that too was denied. I then suggested that my workstation could be placed on the opposite side of the room, but was told that was impractical as they wouldn't be able to hear me when I announced who was calling on what line. And in all fairness, it was a fast-paced job where information came in rapid fire and needed to be acted on right away. I was left with no choice but to take my grievance to the boss, which I did multiple times, writing him letters, requesting face-to-face meetings, etc. I never received more than a token, "I'm looking into the issue." Then, one morning, and it could not have been more than 5 or 2 minutes into the shift, the printer was dinging and rattling away. And I turned to the idiot to my left and asked if he wouldn't mind taking one of the 10 incoming calls as I was already on the line, and he covered the mouthpiece and said he was talking personal business and couldn't. Of course, we had already had this conversation approximately 227 times in the past month, So I wasn't surprised, but just as the manager came back from his smoke break 10 minutes into the day and began casually chatting with the assistant manager, while the cacophony of ignored calls echoed off the walls, I calmly hung up the phone, pushed back from my desk, looked at everyone and said, "Duck this, I'm out of here, I quit." They were astounded. The manager tried to go into damage control, but it was already too late. I put my hand up to silence him and continued walking out. Someone must have called the boss because he was making his way down the carpeted stairs leading to his office. As I was heading for the door and midway down, he too attempted to accost me. And I simply told him to get stuffed and that I'd be sending a self-addressed envelope in which they could forward my final paycheck. The next week, I reported them for a violation. During the renovations, they'd sealed off the fire exit, and a surprise inspection resulted in them receiving a tremendous fine. And of course, they had to pay to have the door and stairwell cleared. That felt great. Story 2. My old boss was a massive hypocrite who made it her duty to stick her nose in everyone's business and micromanage them while simultaneously doing everything she said we weren't allowed to do, like eating and being on her electronics during the job. To put this into perspective, I used to be a night auditor at a hotel. If you're at a chill hotel with a chill manager, this will absolutely be the easiest job you will ever have, and it pays better than basically every other job that requires equivalent effort. I worked there for about a year, starting with a great manager and then downgrading to a decent manager. But the latter was chill and was super hands-off and quite nice, so we all liked him. I left for the Job Corps for about a year and a half, and when I came back, the local company got bought out by Holiday. The new manager was awesome and super nice. She would come in and bring us food and host parties and stuff and generally keep morale up. It was all genuine too, not mandated, because she went out of her way and spent her own time and money on making sure we had what we needed and wanted. She's a wonderful woman, and I miss her. But the assistant manager was essentially a coffee gopher who schemed her way upwards through corporate. She essentially made it her job to pit everyone she could against the main manager, so the manager got fired and then she could rise up the ranks for exposing her. She started by spreading rumors, hiring friends and family to back her up, and blaming the manager for everything she could. And she even sweet-talked the regional into taking her side. Then she started trying to implement more strict rules while we were short-staffed, and she began backstabbing even her old friends. For instance, night auditors used to be able to bring in laptops and stuff and game out in the office, as long as we kept a close eye on the front and made sure breakfast, coffee, and the other technical tasks of the audit were done on time. She banned electronics, eating on the clock. We didn't get paid breaks, and we were usually alone for every shift, so we literally couldn't eat, even if we DoorDashed the food or brought our own lunch. And being anywhere near the hotel when off the clock, we'd often go in and hang out with the other night auditors because we were up at night. This pissed off a lot of people, but our first manager had similar policies except for the fact that he'd go out of his way to make sure we got time off when needed and was not a hypocrite in the slightest. What really pissed us off was that she'd always come in and game on her Switch during 311, eat, and even do her laundry in the hotel's laundry when she was off the clock. She was the biggest hypocrite and went out of her way to make our lives hard. Yeah, that hotel is going through a lawsuit now because the assistant manager basically attempted what I can only describe as a corporate coup on the hotel manager. But the manager had a contract that was violated by both the regional and the assistant, and on top of that cited harassment and bad faith actions, so the regional had to step down, and the assistant is on a much tighter leash by an old manager who knew her and knew the games she'd play. That hotel went from easily the best job I ever had to ducking corporate Game of Thrones in the blink of an eye. It was insane. Anyway, duck that assistant manager and damn Holiday. Story 3. I quit my job 7 months ago, and even though I know I did the right thing, I'm regretting it big time. I've never struggled to find a job until now, and desperation is kicking in. My boss was my favorite person, but biggest stress. He could change the mood of the whole office with his big personality. He could get everyone laughing and loving their job, or he could start throwing crap and tell you that you're a piece of crap in the same day. 2 months before I quit, he was so angry at me for a decision he was very much involved in. We got into a screaming match, which I'm not proud of. I'd never spoken to a boss the way I did him. He brought it out in a lot of us. Anyway, he ended up grabbing roofing tiles and smashing them in the hallway while screaming my name. I'd like to say this was the only fight we got into like that, but it wasn't. I was his best employee at the time, though I can honestly say the long hours, commute, and stress of wondering what his mood was going to be was affecting my drive by that point. I've been in my industry for over 20 years and know it like the back of my hand. I'm great at what I do. Well, the day I walked out was such a small thing, but it was the straw that broke the camel's back. The day before had been so busy and I was filling in for the operations manager once again while trying to do my job as well. I couldn't log all the calls in the computer that were coming in, so I wrote notes as I answered to enter later. By the time I got home, It was 9 p.m. and I was burnt. I sent him a text to tell him exactly that. When I woke up, there was a text pretty much saying that I need to manage my time better and telling me how I could do my job better. I was fuming, but went to work. HR had come in my office to discuss his newest tirades toward the staff and see how I was doing. I was in the middle of telling her that I was at my wit's end and ready to quit, when he walked in and started again on how I could have handled the day before more efficiently. Again, I was doing two people's job because the operations manager frequently called off, but that behavior was repeatedly allowed. Anyway, I gathered up my stuff while he was still talking at me and said, I quit while brushing past him. He said, okay, fine. And that was that. 7 months later, I still get calls from customers, so I talk to him when I need to forward a message. Every time I talk to him, it reinforces why I left. He tells me something rude to relate to the customer, which I never do, and that reminds me that nothing has changed. At the same time, I miss the chaos of my job and the other side of him that made working there feel like you were with family. Glutton for punishment, I guess. Story 4. When I was a university student, I worked at this small company downtown. They hired me because I'd worked for their biggest competitor. I'd left that job because it was obvious that they weren't interested in allowing me to advance any further. I came into the new job with a great deal of enthusiasm. The boss seemed to be willing to recognize my experience, started me out at a salary that was considerably higher than what my new coworkers were earning, and provided me with a very desirable schedule, all of which led to me receiving somewhat less than a hearty welcome from my fellows. Once I got settled into the position, things were fine for a time. I had to deal with a lot of adolescent nonsense from spoiled brats who resented me for things that weren't my decision, but I did my job and ignored the blatant hostility. I figured I was there to work, not to make friends. But after a couple of weeks, there were a few things about the job that became pretty intolerable. There were 4 of us in the department: the manager, the assistant manager, an older man very close to retirement age, who had been a friend of the boss for many, many years, and me, the new guy. It quickly became clear why they'd hired me. The workload was very manageable. They were just a trio of lazy crap bags who expected me to do all the work. They could have easily taken someone from another department and trained them up, or transferred someone from another shift who was already fairly familiar with the job, but they knew that I could hit the ground running and figured if they paid me double what the others were making, I'd be happy with it. Keep my mouth shut and do everybody's share of the work. The manager would find every reason not to do a goddamn thing. I've never, over the course of my career in the corporate world, seen a worker get away with so many smoke breaks. The assistant manager insisted that her paperwork took priority over all else, and she was slow as molasses getting anything done. One fax would come in and the data entry, usually nothing more than a simple name or address change, would take her 2 hours. Normally, those types of things are taken care of by secretaries, but she insisted on doing all of it herself, and the neat little pile she always kept at hand ensured that she was never available for anything else, and the work involved a lot of time on the telephone. Which brings us to the last clown, who spent the entire shift on private calls. He owned a building and would use his time in the office to make inquiries and chit-chat with tenants, speak with plumbers and electricians, estate agents, contractors. Hours and hours would pass, and I'd be the only person actually doing anything. Story 5. Mine is pretty wild. I worked as a teller at a bank. Over the 1.5 years that I worked there, I made friends with a few of my regular customers. We weren't allowed to help friends or family at the counter, which is fair. I had made friends with one such customer and continued helping him at the counter, and my managers called me into a meeting about it. But where it gets crazy is how they decided to approach the topic. They opened with, customer's name, right? Malice Hands. Well, it's none of our business if you have a secret boyfriend behind your boyfriend's back, but you can't be helping him with his transactions at work. To add, when I rejected the accusation and said he was just my friend, my manager said, okay, in a hypothetical universe where you have a secret boyfriend, you can't be helping him at the counter. My jaw dropped to the ducking floor. The manager and assistant manager blatantly and openly accused me of cheating on my boyfriend with this guy. Turns out, the assistant manager is the neighbor of my friend's ex-wife. He's a bit older than me and has 2 daughters. One day I was at their house hanging out with them, sitting on the couch with his 2 daughters, clear across the room from him. His ex-wife came over to pick up the kids, and she later questioned him about, who is that girl, huh? And he said something like, that's my friend Malice Hands. I met her at the bank. So his ex-wife told my assistant manager about it and probably exaggerated and said I was his new thing. I quit about a week later. That was just the tipping point. I had already been considering quitting after having an annual review where I received somewhat poor marks in some categories because, I'll quote my arm as accurately as I can remember, you almost never make mistakes and you get things done very quickly. However, you get things done too quickly and it leaves you with nothing to do. We want you to slow down so that more of your time is spent working. I was flabbergasted. Story 6. There were only two jobs I walked away from, one from boredom, the other from boredom and drudgery. Boredom. I spent one afternoon as an assistant wedding photographer. The pro handed me a camera and asked me to get some candid shots. I did. I guess they came out well because he practically begged me to work for him. But I was pretty much bored out of my skull and just couldn't see myself doing that on a regular basis. It didn't help that the groom's mother and father were divorced and hated one another. Whenever they were within 20 feet of one another, it was like a pall over the room. When it was family photo time and they were in the same shot, they stood at opposite ends, as far away from each other as physically possible, even to the point of leaning outward until the photographer urged them to stop it. Ugh. And now we add drudgery. I should never have attempted being a janitor. Yeah, it was boring, but mostly it was worn and tear on my mind and body. I was assigned to a 2-story office building with no elevator. I had to haul a 40-gallon trash can up the stairs to gather all the upstairs trash, then carry it down the stairs without falling. It takes 2 hands to balance a large trash can on your shoulder. I'm sure there was some kind of OSHA regulation they were making me violate. One night, one of the companies had a document disposal day. Every wastebasket was overflowing with paper. Paper if effing heavy. But the worst was one of the bathrooms. Some guy working upstairs had chronic diarrhea and didn't bother cleaning up the histotines that lined the inside of the toilet. The pig. It was like he sprayed crap out of a fire hose. Even the bottom of the seat had spatter. It was so gross. I made it 3 weeks and had to bail. They found someone to take over. I trained him in one night, gave him the keys to the building, and fled. The owner of the janitorial service called me and complained that I shouldn't have given the new guy those keys, but I didn't care. Story 7. I got a promotion. My raise was a nickel. Previously, the person who had my role got a $3 raise when she took on the position and its duties. I raised it with HR. They said it was the calculated amount for such a position jump. I left. Story 8. Manager tried to pretend me being assaulted by a client on shift wasn't a big deal. Pushed aside my incident reports, etc., walked out, and didn't go back. Story 9. Halfway through my pastry career, I got to be the pastry chef of a renowned local bakery in my county. It has 6 store locations. I was in charge of all the specials, routine favorites, and French pastry special orders. A woman who had been there for 8 years was just always upset with me. Now she was and is, hands down, the best and fastest cake decorator I've ever met. And I don't mean grocery store cakes. I mean works of ducking art that you could eat. She could open her own place in a bigger city and just rake in money. I even told her so. I tried to treat her respectfully, give her the benefit of the doubt. I was even the only person to get her a birthday card when she threw a fit at work after management had forgotten. But she just hated me. I found out it was because of the pastry chef title. When the old chef left, she wanted the job, but was denied because she is excellent at cakes. Years later, I also found out she was only making $18 per hour, which was ducking criminal for what she did for that company. That's what I made then. But I was new on squad and it was a trial starting wage. I don't know. I encouraged her to leave and do her own thing, but in her mind, I was the source of all her problems. When I brought up her behavior to management, they just brushed it off as, "Oh, that's just Leah. She's like that." They talked to her a few times, and each time she would apologize and put on a fake smile, but would revert several weeks later. When I left, I put in my notice that I no longer wished to be subjected to the misdirected anger of their employees. Story 10. I worked at a laundromat for a year. I basically ran it. I worked 7 days a week, 9 hours a day, and got no overtime. I did the invoices, the receiving, any and all customer relations, all cleaning and maintenance, inside and outside the building. I did the general washing, the folding, the bookkeeping, the reception, the steaming, pressing, and the packaging. Daily, my boss would belittle me, calling me a dumb Karen, accuse me of ruining his business, call me a pussy, a wimp, and many more derogatory names that I don't want to repeat. One time he called me a weak pussy because I opted to close safety pins before putting them in a box full of them so I don't get poked. He said I was ruining his business for taking not even a second to close a safety pin. That could do one-handed. One time my dad came in and started talking to me casually. My boss came up and told him he didn't have to humor me and that he would handle his clothes because I'm too incompetent. My dad obviously didn't like that. My boss would frequently dock my pay if I made a mistake. If I booked in a coat as a winter coat instead of light winter coat or car coat, he would take the difference off my paycheck. I was frequently shorted at least $50 or $100 every paycheck. Anyways, I texted that I quit one day and blocked him. He showed up at my house telling me he was going to bring me to work. My boyfriend went and yelled at him and threatened to call the cops. Story 11. I left a hearing clinic because the job title was an inbound call rep and was supposed to be supporting inbound calls from people interested in the products, but instead they put me on outbound telemarketing. I didn't make a single sale the entire time I worked there. I was hung up on for 8 hours a day and cussed out, mocked, abused, and threatened for $16 an hour. I just got up and walked out. The management and staff were exceptionally nice and accommodating, but they bait and switched me. I shouldn't have been left in tears every day for a wage that isn't survivable. Another one was a respiratory clinic. The manager was a cold, hard bully Karen. They never had us fully staffed and would write us up if we took even 1 minute of overtime, despite us never being caught up. Nothing was ever good enough for my manager, and she condescended and careened about literally everything and never gave benefit of the doubt. I was blamed for crap I didn't even do. I had to keep a written log of every interaction. It was so bad. One day I was being berated by my abusive husband on my lunch break until I had a panic attack. I came inside late and she spent half an hour lecturing me about how much of a burden I am to the team for returning late. I emailed her that I'm sorry I'm not good enough and hire a better replacement. I left. When my friend in the warehouse called to mail me my belongings, he told me this Karen went around telling everyone I'd cussed her out and stormed out. Like, my whole team was right there. I'm pretty sure they would have witnessed that. Story 12. I had a situation where I loved my team, my job, and generally speaking, my company. However, my team existed because of another leader's inability to deliver anything tangible. He was an extremely toxic and political director at the company. Over years, my team built the trust of other leaders throughout the organization, meeting with them and helping them regularly. When my wife gave birth to our twin girls, I left for paternity leave. Upon my return, I discovered we had a new mutual leader, and this guy used my absence to get unlimited buy-in and essentially painted me the villain to our new leader, who was eager to start making radical changes. My team was essentially dissolved, and what remained was the Karen work. He managed to take over the budget and headcount, ownership of the roadmap, but offloaded the actual operation. It was a textbook chess move. Upon learning this and education our new leader about why that was a bad idea, she essentially said, "Well, I certainly don't feel good that I was used like this, but the decision is made. Sorry." My response was my 2 weeks' notice. A few things happened in the aftermath. One, all of his managers left shortly after me because he, again, is not capable of delivering on his commitments. The company is hemorrhaging money trying to achieve a fraction of what we did effectively, and on the cheap dude. My next job almost doubled my income. While still employed there, he is no longer permitted to be in a leadership role over employees or be a key decision maker for the organization anymore. I swear he has blackmail on the company, and they are afraid to lose control of him. Story 13. Was hired to be part of a team of 4. A month and 2 quit while needing to expand. Mastered their system off the bat and trained 30 new hires in the following 10 months, record sales. Team got so big they needed a second manager, and I applied for it. I was being headhunted and offered a job to work from home. Walked into my boss's office and said it's the manager position or I leave. He wouldn't commit to it, so I left. Story 14. I discovered and fixed a critical security bug in one of the versions of my company's application. The bug allowed anyone who knew the URL to access the administration panel, which allowed a user to change any part of an insurance policy without auditing or record. It also showed full database connection strings. I sent a warning to the other 8 tech leads for the versions of the application that the bug exists, the fix, and a write-up. 3 years later, I was promoted to the lead of all 9 versions and found that no other team had implemented the fix. Keep in mind, this was 3 months after the Equifax breach. So I implemented the fix, which has been tested and working for 3 years, in all versions of the application, and let the various tech leads and product managers know. The CTO and VP of my division ordered that I remove the fix because I didn't get authorization from the business users to apply it. I refused, explaining that business users don't get to decide to let critical security vulnerabilities remain in the application, and that the change had been tested and working for years. I then showed how one user could commit $20 million in fraud and no one would know for months. They insisted the change be removed and go through the proper approval channels, 4 weeks or so. I again refused. So they ordered a tech lead remove it. I told them if they removed the fix, I was gone. And they did. So I compiled all my notes and sent it to the CEO, CFO, and a member of the board I knew, and walked out the door. Story 15. I got out of the military right at the start of COVID. Lockdowns were announced the same day. Finding a job was difficult. I had experience driving flatbed tow trucks and enjoyed it a lot. I got hired by a local roadside service company that was pretty well known. Over the course of the first week, red flags were constantly popping up. They expected people to come in for training on Saturdays. It was not paid time. An employee quit on day 2 because they claimed he caused $8,000 in damage. They refused to prove that the item was damaged and intended to take it out of his pay. He quit that day. Day 3, a self-proclaimed manager tried to fight me because I took his special parking spot. There was no assigned parking. Day 4, the owner and his son announced they were cutting everyone's pay due to COVID hardships. Day 5, the owner and his son show up to work in their brand new matching 20 model pickup trucks. COVID hardships. After that, I went and told the hiring manager I was done. I offered to stay for 2 weeks out of courtesy as he was an okay guy. He told me to just head home. I don't care how hard financial issues became, that place was trouble. A year and a half later, the owner and his son got arrested for fraud. They stole a lot of money from customers and insurance companies. Story 16. Really, the main reason people leave their jobs is poor leadership. I left my last 2 jobs due to incompetent leadership. My bosses at both places were absolutely terrible. They had no clue what they were doing, and I'm convinced they were only placed in their positions because the higher-ups could have cared less as they sat in their executive offices and collected their 6-figure paychecks, while of us who worked in the trenches worked with mentally ill and addicted patients. All they cared about is making sure we were billing insurance to ensure they were reaping the benefits. Mental health and addiction therapist. I always felt overworked, underpaid, unappreciated, and unsupported. The last straw was my boss not having my back in a very scary situation. I said, damn this. I went home, submitted my resume to a very well-respected agency, was hired immediately, offered quite a bit more money, and said, see you ducking later. I have never been happier. It was the best decision I ever made. Story 17. I just started a new job. The reason I quit my old job is as follows. My company was impacted by a Lockbit breach, and I have had no visibility on my own work since February. Clients are not understanding. I was being screamed at left and right. I was part of a team that managed labs all over the US. Some of these labs were great, and I loved them, and the people who worked for them. But other labs had managers who were complete brats. These were the type of managers who had 10 pages of 1-star Glassdoor reviews by their own staff, yet had the audacity to be lipping off at you because, well, you're corporate and it's just popular to trash on corp. With that last part being said, it is a corporate environment where, internally, nobody knows what the duck is going on. I didn't even know where to send my resignation to, because the organization of my company is that unclear. The pay is garbage. I got bored with the job. However, the new job I started has been a bit of a whirlwind in the first week, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm terrified. It's a lot more money, but I'm terrified. Story 18. Overworked and underpaid. My boss told me he'd give me a bonus after the new year if the company was able to get through the holidays okay. Got through the holidays. I asked about the bonus. He said they just couldn't afford it. It was only gonna be like $500 and would have meant a lot to me, but I kinda saw it coming. What he didn't know, what I had applied to another job that paid 40% more, but wasn't as impressive a job title. But I didn't mind because I was over it at my toxic job. I wanted to see if they could at least redeem themselves a tiny bit with the bonus, but nope, same crap. The next day I accepted the job offer, received email confirmation of my start date, then gave my notice. One of the other team leads, who had become a good friend of mine, told me later that she cried at her desk after everyone else had left because I was only one of like 3 people holding the place together, and she was going to need to look for a new job. Sure enough, they didn't hire 3 people to cover my responsibilities. Yeah, at least 3 jobs were on my shoulders, and were broke, bankrupt, and in debt within 3 months. It wasn't only because of my departure, but a couple others told me later it was sort of the last straw to the final downward spiral. Wonder if the bonus was worth it to withhold in hindsight. Story 19. Not feeling valued when I was overqualified. I saved the business tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, in creative fees as a senior designer. Worked in a bank with a marketing team, and quickly took on loads of work that was being outsourced to a large advertising agency who was taken off a huge retainer and swapped for an as-needed arrangement. They'd nitpick my quarterly reviews with really minor crap after smashing all my targets and expectations. Complain I wasn't doing overtime, like other employees. Whilst on a wage, I'm not working a minute overtime when I don't have to, and generally harbored a crafty culture. Also would come up with weird tasks for me to do outside my job description just to try and use it against me when I decline or don't get them completed when it was even my task to begin with. I started freelancing after hours and began doing really well in projects I enjoyed far more creative freedom in, and the clients were smaller, more valued businesses. I would rather earn enough to get by than suffer another week in corporate marketing hell. Ended up being asked to work for the ad agency who went back to their retainer agreement after I left the bank. They lowballed me and I told them to respectfully beat it too. Have been freelancing for 13 years since and not looked back. Own boss, own business. Story 20. Just left my last job after 3 months solely because of my manager. She showed me no respect, was dumb as hell, and didn't know how to run a department, nor would she listen to any suggestions I had, even though I've been working in different warehouses for almost 10 years, so I know a few things. The final straw was a 2-parter. First was when I had another manager that I got along with tell me that she's chased many people out the job because they couldn't take her attitude. That was the first thing that made me think maybe I should quit. Second part was when my wife had our second baby, and not only would she not accommodate my week off to get settled in with a new child, but as I came into work and my coworkers and other managers were congratulating me, she just asked if I could do a certain task for the day, then walked away with nothing to say about the baby. That was all I needed. Had I stayed longer, I would have cursed her out and caused a big scene. I decided to just send a text, essentially saying how she's a terrible boss and that I quit. I also did it late at night when I was expected in at 6 a.m. Story 21. A new plant manager was hired and was the most arrogant and stupid man I've ever had the misfortune to meet. The man would berate my autistic coworker just to wind him up for a sadistic kick. He installed iPad at our workstations, not as a time tracker, just streamlining the workflow. Wouldn't you know it, a week in. To his job, he started writing me for my time working on a project twice the size that took twice as long, had me reprimanded. He stood at an intimidating 6'6" and would totally take up your personal space. He'd ask what you were doing and would walk away mid-sentence when he couldn't grasp your explanation. Eventually, I told him to get ducked in front of the entire shift and walked off the floor. He followed me into the change room, accusing me of letting my family down. I told him to never mention my family, and he had no place talking to me ever again. I told him how much he destroyed the moral of the entire company, and that I personally thought he was a piece of crap. The look on his face, so ducking worth it. I landed on my feet and was employed a week later. Story 22. Mostly due to substance abuse. I'm an alcoholic, figured it was best to just leave before I got fired. Though there was one job that I left because I saw no light at the end of the tunnel. It was retail, specifically a receiving supervisor position. My predecessor left us with quite a bit of backlog. It resulted in a nightmarish amount of backlog. In the midst of my time as a supervisor, I had a skeleton crew, little payroll for what crew I had, and what seemed to be an onslaught of freight we were sent. We did eventually come clean. The receiving team that I helped lead eventually did get to see what a clean and empty backroom looked like, only after hours of overtime and a very intense inventory. After months of only having 4 days off a month, we ended up filling up our backroom with unprocessed freight one day and receiving more the next day. I couldn't do it anymore. My addiction, staffing shortages, and burnout led me to just quit. I feel bad about having just left. But part of the reason I was drinking so heavily was because I wasn't ready for the position I was put into. I don't regret leaving. My mental health did improve for a while, but my dependence on alcohol went up. I wish things had gone differently. Story 23. I used to work at an inpatient substance abuse rehab, and they chose to pack those guys in like sardines and treat them like crap, and a lot of those people were leaving and hit themselves. I absolutely hated management and the cruel things they did and said to their own employees and the vulnerable people they were supposed to be helping. I wish cruel fates upon management duck all those people. Story 24. Worked for a cleaning company that serviced FedEx and Southwest aircraft. I was the night shift lead. At my yearly employee evaluation, I was told I was the best worker they had. They trusted me to do any job, that I got all my coworkers on and off jobs in a timely manner, and appreciated that I'd come into work on my day off if they were short-staffed. The managers for the aircraft companies had nothing but glowing reports concerning me. My manager told me the company doesn't put perfect 10 scores in all evaluation categories, as there is always room for improvement and no one is perfect. Because of that, they had to put 8s and 9s in some areas, even though they couldn't verbally tell me what I'm doing wrong or could improve. Instead of getting my final raise, which would be $1 an hour, they gave me 90 cents and said they could give me the 10 cents next year. Just pure disrespect. The owner of the company just bought himself a lifted F-150 with all the extras included. 2 months later, I took a job with the lower pay just to get away. Didn't give them any notice about it. Apparently, all the jobs the next few days were not done correctly and or on time. A lot of missed calls on my phone that week. Story 25. Honestly, dress code. It was a IT networking job. Wanted business professional dress code in the office for some reason after 2-3 years being there. Tried it for a month, but you know that feeling that it just didn't feel right. A lot of people felt the same and quit like me. Unfortunately, the company went under. The owner was trying to sell and wanted the image of its doing well. Story 26. I hated the couple that were 10% owners of the restaurant I worked at, and unfortunately were the general managers appointed by the 90% owners. They were uneducated, ignorant, racist, and spiteful. Telling them to duck off and eat a bag of bananas was such a great day. Oh, and I locked the office door and threw the keys in there before I shut the door. I was a shift manager and bartender at this college town restaurant and bar while I was in undergrad. They had a huge meltdown because numerous chains had opened up in town and their business was struggling, told all the shift managers that we were a bunch of spoiled college kids who would be moving on, and we didn't take our jobs seriously and didn't care about them, and that this place was their life. If we were spoiled college kids, we wouldn't be working at a restaurant. I knew kids who were spoiled with parent credit cards and plenty of cash every month, so I took offense and said, "Adios, Karines." Then I got my acceptance letter for law school, so I knew I'd never work at a restaurant again. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I had a great time, and it was good money with the tips from bartending. Story 27. Employer didn't allow anyone to take vacations during the month of December, but I had already booked a flight for a 3-week vacation for Christmas, so I told them that I was leaving and never went back to work there. Story 28. There were a few straws that broke the camel's back, but the main one was that I was a company director for an organization. I invented a rostering system that made us much more efficient. Think 3 extra staff on the floor every day, while also saving the company between $100–$250K per year per site, and we had around 800 sites, so a win for everyone. Staff morale and quality was very high. She then tried to take the credit for my work, adjusted the system to also remove those extra staff to save further money. Instead of using it for good, she used it for evil. This just put more pressure on the team, and then that meant that staff turnover for my site went from 1 person leaving per year to 1 a month. Quality dropped. I had to do 12-hour days to support the team, and we were exhausted. For the quality drops and staff turnover, she tried to make me the scapegoat. I resigned, it fell further into a hole, she was moved on. 3 years later, they still can't hold on to good staff. Story 29. I spent 2 years working as a dispatcher for an Amazon DSP. The owner of the DSP decided to hire 3 new dispatchers that had experience. Me and the other 2 tenured dispatchers had to train them like newbies, and 2 weeks later, one of the new guys slipped up and told us how much he was being paid. Turns out the new guys were being paid $3 an hour more than us, and when I questioned the owner during a meeting, he flat out refused to discuss the matter. I ended up quitting that day, along with another tenured dispatcher. The new guys had no one to learn from, and ended up leaving one by one within 2 months of me quitting. No clue how they're doing now. Story 30. My last job was an absolute crap show. I was consistently alone, doing a job that required at least 3 people to run smoothly. Management was just awful. Worked there for just over 2 years and watched 11 managers come through my department trying to fix the place. The general manager is also a banana. It's a failing business at this point, but it's got too much momentum to just crash and burn. The current owners are using it as a cash cow and stripping every asset they can get their grubby hands on. My coworkers were great for the most part, and made some really close friends during the time I worked there. I burned out pretty hard at the end of my time there, to the point I'd have panic attacks before a shift, or I'd be halfway through a really busy shift and go throw up because I felt so stressed. They'd even try guilt you into doing a shift when you tried to call in sick. I hope the business closes soon to save anyone who's still there. Duck that place. Story 31. 1. Coworker made a slur comment. I called it out, admittedly angrily but not aggressively. She cried in the back room for the rest of the day, and I was corrected for causing conflict. That was Friday. I put my resignation in Monday. 2. Lack of advancement and training and a general poor fit. 3. I was moving to a new city. 4. Extremely unethical conduct, sexism, and bullying. I was fortunate enough not to get targeted directly, but when I left after 19 months, I was the coworker with the 5th longest tenure, including both the partners. 5. I outgrew the job. Still sad about this one, but it was the right decision. 6. I tried a larger, more corporate firm for my first time, and it was good for my ego, but bad for my morale. Also, I got offered way more money for a better management position back in the small firm/being face-to-face with small businesses space. Story 32. I came out of retirement to help a friend out. New boss, great guy, older gentleman, 80. It was like I was working for my grandfather. New boss comes in, he comes to my office, sits down, and puts his feet on my desk. Proceeds to tell me what I was gonna do, blah, blah, blah. I first tell him to get his feet off my desk, and no, I'm not doing what he wanted. It was illegal, but he thought he was so smart he found a loophole. I told Grandpa I enjoyed our time, I'm leaving. A hole confronted me in front of other employees, and I told him that my ethical standards were too high for him and left. Still keep in touch with Grandpa. He'll be 88. Story 33. Got robbed at gunpoint. Pizza delivery. Told them I was kind of struggling with anxiety after sunset. They told me to suck it up, take a weekend, and be back Monday. The robbers were also still at large, and had shot 3 people since robbing me. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, though. Some guys were taking free pizza wings home, but wouldn't cut me in, starving college kid. I was routinely getting the crap parts of town that was a high risk of being assaulted or attacked by dogs and had crap tips, and the car topper was supposed to be optional, but they treated it like mandatory. Making issues worse, I didn't get the premium because it didn't light up because it was damaged, and the working ones were always taken by the time I got in. I was there for like 6 months. Learned a lot at that job, including standing up for myself and not putting myself at risk, looking for an exit plan at all times. Story 34. I worked at a grocery store as my second job because my first one was a seasonal job. I put on my resume I still worked at my seasonal job. When I was like 16, when the season for my first job was coming back, I told my manager that I needed to work earlier in the days, Friday, Sunday, because of my seasonal job. Not working completely, just needing to work earlier in the day. And she straight up told me that they wouldn't be able to accommodate that because 1, they needed people on weekends. Once again, never said I couldn't, just that I needed to work earlier in the day. And 2, because they had me first. When I read, she texted me saying they had me first, like I was some property. I never went in for my shift that day, and never returned Duck U. Kroger. That's why y'all tried handing out pizza y'all had left out overnight for a $1 a slice. Story 35. I landed in a full-blown burnout after they tried the 5th bonus model in 1 year. Changed the entire process that was working just fine. Wanted people that were hired with the perspective of permanent home office to come to the office, forced them into a tiny, crowded and loud space that made focusing on the tasks impossible. They built a new office for a couple $1 million, but were not able to provide the Corona bonus, but used the new office build on the sweat of their exhausted workers to meet up with their fellow CDU members. I am over 30, and it was the first time in my life where I had to take several months off in between jobs just to get myself in a stable mental position again. Several times I became so sick because my body was refusing to get to the office that I had to get off the train and vomit straight in the next bin. Story 36. I and a coworker managed to our department despite another coworker who was like half a person, but anything he touched, we had to redo. We hired 2 more people and really had it great, and then they thought, let's add 3 more. I told them we didn't need it. I said, fire the dude that sucks and replace him, and we will be perfect. I told them we'd be beyond bored and that if they hired more than one and didn't fire Duckface, I'd bounce. She laughed at me and said, no, I wouldn't. The day they announced it, I'd already worked out my exit strategy and put in my notice. They were completely caught off guard as my explicit statement telling them I'd quit if they hired 3 people and didn't fire Dumbass. A month after I left, they fired Dumbass and did not backfill my position. So nearly listened to me. Story 37. I left my previous job for 2 reasons. They were in an industry that was becoming commoditized, computer servers and printer ink, and I didn't think they had much of a future remaining. They were in a cost-cutting death spiral. 2. I was assigned to a high-profile but super demanding client for 8 years, and it was killing me. I asked to be switched for a year, but was told nobody else can handle it. So I resigned. I had a new job lined up when I made my final request. Ironic follow-up. 3 years later, my new employer asks me to take over that very same client. Been on that client for almost a decade, but my new employer's decidedly not a commodity, and the demanding client treats us with a bit more respect. Plus, we got involved in a project that is ultra high profile for both companies, Kubernetes-based, which makes working under pressure more bearable. Story 38. I can tell you a reason I was let go from a job that is quite interesting. I was 20 and I was hired at a dealership to become a car salesman. No prior experience, as they were well aware of. Halfway through my 3rd day, the GM called me into his office and told me he had to let me go because it's so slow that they can't even try to train me, which was true. Only 1 customer came in over the 3 days and they didn't buy anything. But here's the kicker. His words were, I have to let you go. It's too slow to even try to train you right now. And besides, I can't date my employees. What are you doing Friday night? I looked at him and said, I'm not sure yet, but it's definitely not going to involve you. And that was that. Story 39. Didn't quit, but stopped trying so I would get fired. The bosses changed my schedule all the time, which became a major problem. And when I brought it up, they kept saying, I need to adjust. At one point, they called me at 7 in the morning asking where I was at, only for me to find out they changed my schedule 2 days before without notifying me. I worked the night before and didn't get home till 1. That was the breaking point. I didn't want to quit since it was a summer job and I needed the money for college, but I did kind of give up. I'd do the bare minimum for the next 2 weeks before they questioned me. I said, if you're not going to respect my time, I will not respect yours. Can we come to an agreement on that? They then said I was fired. Story 40. I quit my last electrical job a little over a year ago after a project manager told me and my apprentice were wastes of money because we weren't working fast enough. Every room we touched hot, checked perfectly. All the faster teams had problems everywhere because they were just burning through as fast as they can. Story 41. My manager was always great to my department, but he kept letting slip company policies like treating the better salespeople better and letting them get away with things because they were good at sales. And he said they always contest every unemployment claim in court, no matter what. And then he mentioned looking into whether the phone salespeople could get into collections work, and I just wanted to get as far away from all of that as possible. Different job, my boss was often loudly political, and yes, I disagreed with his politics. But what really annoyed me is he had just obviously bad political takes even outside the left-right dynamic. Like he said, the government should make a profit on every program it has or shut it down. That's not like a libertarian take. That's not understanding how governments work. Story 42. Have autism and anxiety disorders. When I got my job at Big Lots when I first moved out here, I told them specially I can't do register, I will unload stock and move heavy furniture. We all agreed. That was my job for 5 months. Black Friday, they call me in and say, "Hey, we need you in the back." I say, "Okay," thinking I'm just going to resupply inventory. Mind you, this place is friggin' packed. I've never had more anxiety in my life at that point. They tell me 2 coworkers called out short-staffed and I have to go on register. 1, our agreement was for my main position, and 2, I never learned the damn register. After being berated, I just walked out, leaving both managers to figure out that crap themselves. Story 43. I quit my last job because they fired my coworker and promoted me in the same day because they knew I would quit when I found out. I quit the job before that because there were massive ethical issues with animal care there. And by the time I left, after working there 10 weeks, I was the most senior employee. The owner was also spying on me and my company provided housing. The job before that, I left because I was hired as an intern manager while their manager was out on medical leave and they decided to fire her and keep me permanently without consulting me. It was always supposed to be temporary. The job before that, I was laid off because my job was outsourced. I can keep going back, but then we get into pre-college work and that's boring. Story 44. I worked in process engineering. I did a lot of continuous improvement. The project coordinator always put his name in the workstations that I was improving, as if he was the one who did all that. I talked to the manager of our engineering problem about this issue. I mentioned the fact the coordinator don't even attend the meeting and doesn't even know the operators of the stations. And the fact that he rarely contacts the suppliers, I did. He said that he will look into it. A few days later, I caught them in a bar. They were actually distant relatives, and the project coordinator was a Nebo baby. I was already fed up with the company. That was my final straw. I quit the next day. That was the best decision I have ever made. Story 45. I worked for a company in Korea where they expected you to divulge personal information and sacrifice your personal time, lunch, dinner, weekends, etc., to be a part of the tribe. If you didn't have lunch with them on a daily basis or drink with them on a weekly basis and gossip about work, share more personal info, talk about how hungover you are the day after, etc., you couldn't really integrate into their tribe, and this is actually considered in your professional evaluation. You can't even fully integrate anyway if you're not ethnically Korean, even if you partake in this tribal BS. Simply staying professional and maintaining a clear division between work and life, and that not being covertly tolerated, took a toll on me over time, and I didn't want to deal with their primitive tribalism. Story 46. When I was 18, I worked seasonal at a toy store chain. I worked in the electronic department. It was December 27th, and I was scheduled to work until 2 a.m. After my lunch break and around 10 p.m., I got really sick, like holding in, throwing up, and trying not to crap myself mid-conversation with customers. I told my manager that I was super sick and there's no way I could stay. They said I was the only one to work that department, and I had to stay, so I said, "Duck this. It's after Christmas and late, so it was ridiculous to force me to stay when we barely had any shoppers." I went to the bathroom, threw up on all 4 walls, and let my diarrhea conveniently miss the toilet. I clocked out and never went back. Story 47, priorities. More money and not seeing my kids grow up, or less money and seeing my kids while they are still little. I hate that it took me so long to see what was important. I missed some time with them and thought it was supposed to be that way. Work a lot to provide for them, but never see them. Always working long and late, weekends. But it all came to a head one day when I had that realization and I just quit no notice. Thought I would never do that, but I couldn't take another day after I realized what I had to do. Currently, work from home, weekends off, holidays off, make less. But I spend time with my family, and that's what matters. Priorities. Story 48. Was hired at a company to be a process engineer. Ended up working in a job that was for someone that barely graduated high school. They paid me what was promised, but kept me as a warehouse employee. They promised it was temporary. Next thing I know, I'm reporting directly to the warehouse manager and am constructing pallets, still getting the right pay. About 2 months go by, and I am called by HR and told that I haven't reported to work and wanted to know why. I was there every day, but warehouse workers were supposed to work every other weekend. I was hired to work 5 days Monday through Friday. Long story short, they threatened to fire me and I just quit instead. Really weird place. Story 49. My moral compass was flying around like no tomorrow. The working conditions, the band-aids we did to houses, remodel construction, the guilt tripping of taking any sort of time off. Some examples. Putting us on a roof when it was sleeting, rain and snow, with absolutely no safety precautions. The foundation was literally crumbling in a house. Dirt was pouring from the walls, and we were told to just slap some concrete on it without actually reinforcing the walls. One time I was in a terrible bout of insomnia and was told I could take a day to recoup. Got 2 hours of sleep going on 40+ hours of work and took the offer. Almost got fired for taking the offer because I wasn't being a team player. Story 50. Greener grass usually. One job though, I asked for a performance review for 6 months, weekly. Never got one. As I was about to give my notice, they said they would do a performance review on X date, which was about a week before my last day. I told them to never mind and gave my notice. One gave me weird cult vibes. Nice people to work with though, but truly I left because of greener grass, and it was.